know how much I love sitting across from you and having podcasts and talking podcast with you?
Yeah, a lot.
And why do you say yeah a lot?
Because we've worked hard to get me to do this. You have worked hard to get me to do this.
I have not worked hard.
Luckily,
you've wanted to do it. You've said that you wanted to.
I enjoy talking to you.
Yeah.
And that makes it easier.
Hello, fellow streakers. How is everyone doing today?
Hello. Welcome to our little podcast.
Our conversation.
Our conversation. That's what I should say. Welcome to our conversation.
It's one of the things that, as we've talked about it in previous podcasts, is why we started this, is because we love the conversation. One of the things, we're going to talk a little bit today about our greatest streaking fear. And one of the greatest streaking fears is that we talk streaking all the time with everyone. And they'll just be like, really? Let's not invite the Downses out anymore.
You guys have anything else to talk about?
At
please?
all? Zero.
Even our kids are like, really?
Really? Again?
You know, I've accomplished some things in life. Could we talk about that? Yeah, but it's because of streaking. Aren't you so proud of that?
No.
Just kidding, kids.
Get away. So we do the podcast so that we can talk
Maybe
about
that's why streaking that's why it came about, is so we'd have just stuff to talk about all the time.
All the time.
We love talking.
That's it.
Anyway.
That's the only way we serve, is we talk. We just let words flow forth out of our mouth.
We're in rare form this morning. Here we
go. One of, a couple of conversations ago, we were talking about our greatest streaking fear. We're going to talk about that in just a second. We're right there. The book is going to be released. Close. How many times have we been saying this now for the last,
since we started this podcast, I know. All we've done is when the book is released. What are we going to say afterwards? And
and there it is.
The book is out there.
It's out there now. And so the book, the app, and one of the things we can update is, we talked a little bit on the last one about the audiobook. I'm just curious, and I don't know if anyone else is, but I'm curious. What was your experience in recording the audiobook? Because one of the first things that I hear when I say we're recording the audiobook to, people who are close to us or associated with us, they always do a pause. And the pause is like this. So, are you doing an audiobook? I'm like, yeah. And then they say, are you recording it yourself? And we say, yeah. Oh. And I'm like, why the pause? Well, books read by the author aren't always the best. So I'm curious.
Well, I guess we'll find out. If nobody buys the audiobook, then we'll have to
or if they buy it and they're like, oh my goodness, please get rid of this immediately. Hire someone. Please hire someone to read this
book. So what was my first?
Yeah, what was your experience like?
Okay. Honestly, the hardest thing about the audiobook, recording it for me, was we had to say exactly what the book says. And sometimes I wanted to add a little something, because we've had other thoughts or other experiences, and I'd have to be like, okay, just read what the book says. That's what my job is. Just read the book.
I found the same one, as far as, because there were thoughts that would come to mind that
we
were
wanted
spurred
to
by
talk
something.
more.
It was like, you know what? Just let me pause in the reading here for a second and share with you a few thoughts.
I'm just going to interject a little thought. Okay,
and that doesn't work. Yeah, you actually have to. So we had to be very rote to what the book said. The other thing that I found challenging is that the way that it's written is not always the way that you would speak it.
That is true.
But you have to write it that way because of the way the grammar is and everything else. To be understood, you write it that way.
But it wasn't always conversational.
Exactly.
You'd read it one way and think, so sometimes we would have to re-record because we would say it conversationally when we're like, well, that's not what the book says.
That's not what the words were on the page.
So.
We truncated a word here, or said something a little bit different there, or rearranged the words in one way or another.
Occasionally I made up words that I was like, oh, whoops, that's not what that says.
So we hope that now here's the other thing, is Audible has very strict standards as to what can be submitted. And so it had to be within a certain decibel range, and there had to be a certain...
Okay, so funny thing.
Yeah.
If people are buying the Audible and they're like, this isn't read by Jeff and Jamie, you'll know that we obviously didn't get it right, and we had to have someone else
and we had to hire someone else to do it.
But hopefully
we did.
We've learned a lot.
Yeah, we have, and it was a lot of fun. It took us a couple of months to get the whole thing recorded, even though the read itself is really not that long. I think it's 3 or 4 hours as far as the read itself.
I'll be curious to see how people like the Audible part of it, because one thing I've noticed with the people that have been able to read the book pre-release, I thought people would read through it faster because it's a pretty short, easy book to read.
Yeah.
in terms of just, sitting down and reading it. But I'm finding that it's actually, people are taking longer. I think because you sit and think about the principles and you start to internalize it and think, okay, what can I do? Or how would this work for me?
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit longer of a read in that
I look
regard.
at it, and it is one of those things. I look at it as concentrated orange juice. You got to add water.
Yeah.
And the water here is thinking time.
Yep.
To really take it in, like we were talking about on our last podcast about the small and simple. You really got to take a little bit of time to drink that in. And it's hard to swallow in one big gulp, or it's hard to taste it because it's so concentrated. As far as we tried to pare it down to the fewest number of words possible that would communicate the point,
right,
but also make it
concise.
enjoyable.
Right. The other thing too that I love is that what happens is people read and start to learn the methodology is that it becomes personal.
Yeah.
And so when you say adding the water, sometimes to me, adding the water is I have to look at myself and decide, one, what things are important to me.
Yeah.
Two, who do I want to be?
Right.
And then even something as simple as deciding what your personal laughably simple is can take some effort. Like deciding, okay, what's truly my laughably simple?
Yeah.
And so that
Because
to
it's
me
because it can be so much different than someone else's.
Yeah.
Or from what you've heard before, or even what you've thought before in your own life, as far as what's laughably simple.
Right.
And then keeping the record on it, and also creating the community.
And so you wanted to say you have a greatest streaking fear as people start streaking.
Right.
What's your greatest?
I do. My greatest streaking fear. You ready? It's that people will stick with just a physical streak. Because one of the things that I found is that, and that's where we started.
Right.
We started with a physical streak. We started with run, walk at least 1 mile, 6 days a week.
Right.
I mean, that's where we started, and we stayed with that for 300 days. Now, this was prior to us saying, hey, you can apply streaking to so many different things.
Well, it took us a year to figure out that we could try this methodology with something else.
Why did it take us a year, do you think?
I don't know. Why do you think?
I
actually don't know.
Well, I think because streaks are typically only in the physical realm.
Yeah, because there's so much in sports.
In sports and diet and exercise, and I mean, if you look at any of them, there's a few apps out there that have the streak behind it. You know what I mean? I think, what is the Snapchat streaks?
Oh, yeah.
They're out there. Take a Snapchat a day, and it keeps track of your streak.
Right.
There's, I know in MyFitnessPal, they have how many days you've recorded your calories, but again, physical.
That's a physical. Snapchat wouldn't be a physical one, but
there's one that right now, Charity Miles, that I have downloaded on my phone, and it has a streak right on the front of it.
Awesome.
But again, physical.
It's a physical.
And I think that it makes sense because winning streaks are associated with athletics and sports. I mean, there's not usually winning streaks delineated in business organizations or in associations. Right. Hey, we've got a winning streak going of 300 days of writing a page. Woo! You know what I mean? And so so I don't think that it is something that comes naturally to someone. I mean, I think that's why it took 300 days for us to look at it and to say, you know what, you can apply this to something else. But we also had to understand that there were laws to be able to do that.
Right. And we kind of learned those as we went along through the process.
What's your greatest streaking fear?
You really going to ask me that after I jokingly told you what it was before we started this podcast?
You brought it up.
My greatest streaking fear is that people will actually listen to these podcasts. I'm like, I'm just throwing stuff out there.
Just throwing stuff out there.
If people actually listen.
And okay,
You're actually going to ask me something for reals.
Yes.
Okay.
No. But why is that a fear of yours? And I think this is significant because this is what makes me just love you even more.
We're getting very personal here.
It's not that personal. It's a little bit personal, but why is it a fear of yours?
Well, I'll tell you why I do the podcasts with you first.
Okay. Tell me that.
Because I have had streaking help me.
Yeah.
Like what we've put into place, we put into place it was a personal thing to start with. That's how it started, is that. So I've seen success in writing in my journal. I've seen success in reading to the boys. I've seen success in simple things like taking my vitamins, drinking water, some of which are more of those physical streaks.
But
I've seen success in other things too.
And by the way, just a little side note, I'm going to riff in here. I'm not opposed to physical streaks. It's just my greatest fear that you'll stay with physical streaks. Anyway, okay, so keep going.
So that's why I do enjoy talking about it, because I do get excited that I've had success and I want other people to feel that too. I want them to be excited and realize that they can have success in those things that are important to them too.
Right.
So that's why I do it. Why has it been hard for me? I don't ever want to come across as I know anything more than other people, I guess. I don't know how else to say that other than...
Which, by the way, this is what I love about her, is because you truly do feel that way. I mean, and I do too. I mean, there are so many amazing people. I mean, the people that are listening to this podcast, we look up to and respect so many of them.
So much life
and what we want to do
and...
is encapsulate what they're doing. We'd rather, I think both of us would rather talk about a whole bunch of other people and their streaks and not necessarily ours.
So that's been my thing, is sharing so much personal things, and I would never
and you don't want to be put on a pedestal. You don't want to be put out there as like you're superhuman somehow because you do this.
So I'm looking at this little paper of what we were actually going to talk about today, and this isn't
we are
anywhere.
We are getting there. We're getting there. It is something that I admire and respect about you.
Thank you.
I want everyone out there to know this, because I think that's the gold. That's the thing about it, is you love and respect people, and there is so much good in so many people, and we can learn so much from so many. That if you're listening to this right now, we love and respect you, and we love hearing the stories about how streaking has worked for you.
I love hearing people's stories where they're like, I'm doing this thing and I've never done it before, and I'm so excited because I'm doing it consistently, and I love those stories.
I mean, I love the story how you've drained several pens dry because of writing at least one sentence daily in your journal.
That is kind of a cool thing.
That is kind of cool. I mean, that is awesome. You've never done that before. Have you ever drained I'd ask anyone out there, have you ever drained a pen dry?
No.
And if you're saying yes right now, you probably have a streak.
Well, and I love that I'm seeing results of it as well. So my reading to the boys streak started because one of my sons has dyslexia, and I was worried that because reading was so hard for him, that reading would always be associated something that was hard work.
Had a little technical, interesting technical
was,
little pop there. Sorry about that.
But I was worried that he would always associate reading with just this thing that was hard and work, and not ever feel the joy of reading.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to read to him the books that he would be reading if he could read at that level, and that we would share those things.
Right.
And just this last week, since school has started for this year, he has been able to read 3 books in a series, like all 3 of the books. And he's doing it because he's excited about the story.
Yeah.
And that's what I've wanted to happen.
That is happiness and joy across the board.
Yep.
Everything that he does there.
And I credit a lot of what's been able to happen there with streaking, with our consistency of reading every night, and the books we've been able to read.
I'm just going to say it out loud. I credit you a lot with that, because you have a desire to want Bowen, Chance, all of our children to succeed. And because you value that, because you place value on that, like we were talking about on our last podcast, you pay the consistency currency.
Right.
To make that happen.
And I love, because the currency added up. Like I'm starting to see.
There's compound interest.
Compound interest.
That's kind of an interesting subject as well, as far as the compound interest is concerned and how it adds up over time. So my greatest streaking fear, just to kind of put a cap on this, is that you'll leave it in the realm of a physical streak. I don't think that that's bad to start there, because what happens with a physical streak is it's an extrinsic validation that streaking works.
Right.
Whereas some of the other streaks, like professional and personal development that you're going to be setting in the future, are more intrinsic in nature, but they pay huge compound interest in the future. That's why, for example, with what you're doing with reading with Bowen and Chance, read at least 5 sentences daily to Bowen and Chance. That's paid huge compound interest, with Bowen now reading 3 books and doing
on
it
his own. And I wasn't a part of that
in a shorter amount of time than he ever has.
And now he set his own streak for himself to read every day.
Which, by the way, he loves using the app. He's one of our beta testers on the app, and he's got 2 streaks on his app. One is the piano, play at least 5 notes on the piano, or 1 note. Play at least one note on the piano daily, and then to read at least 1 sentence daily.
1 sentence daily. So, and he has loved that. I wanted to go back a little bit to the intrinsic versus extrinsic value, because you bring up a really good thing that we had talked about earlier. And that's the thing that, one of the things that I love about streaking is the ability to focus on characteristics that you want in your life
Yeah.
that maybe can't be measured at that level. So for example, I want to be a more kind person, or I want to be more forgiving, or I want to be more attentive, or how do you set a goal around attributes like that? It's difficult to find a way to measure.
And those aren't really goals.
And they're not really goals.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's where streaking has come in that I've loved, is it's allowed me to be able to have measurement in something that previously would be difficult to measure.
So as you look at that then, so what you say, for example, if looking at it as an attribute, you're saying I want to be more kind, as I want to attain that attribute, then what you're saying is that to do something that would lead me to being more kind, like, for example, sending one thoughtful message weekly, something
Right.
like that. I don't know.
Right. That now you have something that you can look back on and say, so we had an interesting discussion this morning. We're going to switch what we were going to talk about.
Okay, I'm going with you. Wow.
So I
have no idea where she's going, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to go with her on this one.
I have a streak that I've had for 3 years. And I asked you this question this morning because it's a simple streak that allows me to focus on certain people in my life.
Right.
And it's something that has been a little bit hard for me to
Well,
make
it's really
happen.
about serving people.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
serve people in a
yes,
certain
to
way.
serve
I mean, that's
people in a certain way. And
yeah.
I wanted to get better at it. And I've been doing it for almost 3 years now. And I was thinking about it this morning and I thought, I don't know that I'm any better. I mean, I don't know that I've gotten better at this thing. And so I asked you the question.
Everyone is dying to know what this streak is, but she will not tell you. This is one that she keeps very personal. She only shares it with me. Everyone is like, what is this streak that she has?
know.
Just know it's
So
about
it's
serving others.
It's okay to have a community of one.
A community of two. You
A
and
community
me.
of two. Well,
Yeah.
you're my-
Oh, I guess so. Yeah, one.
My one other person.
There you go.
So the thing that I was asking myself this morning is, I've had this streak for 3 years. Am I deluding myself into thinking that I'm doing better simply because I'm doing some little thing that I'm checking off each day on this thing? And by having that thing that I check off, it makes me think, oh, okay, see, I'm doing it. But in actuality, I'm not progressing.
Look at me. I'm doing it.
I'm
Therefore,
doing it, but I'm not.
But
So
I'm
that
not
was
really
kind of my
progressing. So in
fear.
other words, I'm checking the box, but I'm really not making any progress.
Not only am I, and by checking that box, am I just making myself think that I am doing it instead of forcing myself to deal with the quote unquote reality that maybe I'm really not doing it? That was my question to myself this morning. And
the question that you asked me as
and the
well.
question that I asked
that we
you.
started to talk about. And you started to answer that question.
I did start to answer that question. So what I realized is that as I've done this streak every day, it has opened up my mind to thinking. So today what happened is I've had this streak and I analyzed where I am in that streak as a person. Like, is this streak helping
Because one
me
of the things that
become
we
who I want to
believe
be?
is we don't believe doing streaking for streaking's sake. I mean,
No.
I don't have things down that I'm doing a streak on just to say that I've done this thing for, 1,375 days. It's something that really is of value to me, and it's laughably simple. I think that you're not having the streak just to have the streak, but I think
Right.
you're asking the next question up, which is it really am I growing
Am
by
I
doing
growing?
this?
Yes. Or am I just letting myself think I'm growing because I'm
Am I deluding myself?
deluding myself?
into delusions of grandeur that I've been
Thinking-
doing this thing when in actuality I haven't been growing at all?
Exactly. That was my question of myself. And so as I was thinking about this, I thought, well, the fact that I have been doing this thing every day, when I ask myself the question of growth, personal growth, I'm starting in a different place than I would have been if I hadn't been doing that thing every day. So in other words, I can at least look at myself and say, I have thought about this streak every day for almost 3 years.
And I think
So it's-
I've thought about being this person
Yes.
through this streak,
Through this streak, every day.
single day. Now that is significant because you're changing your heart and your mind at that point in time.
Exactly. And I realized that I was like, okay, right there, I'm starting in a different place. I'm not starting back at this place where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even think about it. I've been thinking about it every day. I have given it a place in my life every single day. And that opened up to me with this particular streak, thinking about some other things that helped me to recognize that I had missed something. And in my analysis, I went back and thought, oh, I missed that. So in other words, because I had been doing this streak every day, it opened up thoughts about myself and my own personal growth
Right.
that I don't think I would have had, and things that I had missed that all of a sudden I was like, oh, I didn't notice that. I could, and it helped me to refine that streak. I'm actually going to add another streak to complement.
Well, I think that one of the things, so I'm going to be we're going to be less conceptual and a little bit more concrete. You were looking at it and saying, I had a person ask me to serve them in a certain way.
Yes.
And I dismissed it.
Because it wasn't, I'm embarrassed to say, but it wasn't that big. It didn't
Wait a second.
meet
It was a small
my criteria.
thing. Yeah.
And so I immediately dismissed it.
Right.
And when I was thinking about it this morning, what that person said came back to me, and I thought, why haven't I done what she said?
I could have done that
I could have
very
done that.
easily.
It was very simple.
But it was too simple.
But it was too simple. And so I discounted it and discredited it and didn't. But
Which leads us all the way back to the first law of streaking.
keeping it laughably simple.
Exactly.
Which is interesting, again, that how hard that is. You think it's simple, but for whatever reason.
And if I do just this thing, it can get there. One of the things that you said and that I want to highlight, because we were talking about intrinsic and extrinsic. One of the other things that you said is that for the streak that you have, there's no outward show.
No extrinsic.
There's no extrinsic
What's that word?
validation.
Yes, no extrinsic validation.
There's nothing saying you're doing a great job. There's not people coming to you and saying, wow, that is fantastic. It is all intrinsic. It is everything inside.
But the analysis that I had today of myself and the intrinsic value that I gained from that, and recognizing this whole other thing about myself that I wouldn't have been able to see had I not been doing this streak.
For how long?
For almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years.
Which is an interesting thing. 3 years, you guys, that I've been struggling with this streak of feeling like, am I even progressing in this?
I know.
Today, I felt like, okay, I'm learning about myself, and now I have a next step to take.
Yeah.
Because of what I've been doing. It was cool.
I think so. Break out of a physical streak.
Yes.
Don't stay there, and be patient. This is not,
patient.
as Talon loves to say, our streaker Talon, he loves to say, he's our chief marketing officer. He says, this is not 2-day Amazon shipping.
No, this is not 2-day Amazon shipping.
All right. Well, we'd love to hear from you. If you have a question for us, please email us at Jeffrey, Jeffery,
or
at
Jamie,
streakingmastery.com, or
Jamie, Jami, at streakingmastery.com.
All right, everyone. Have a fantastic day. And hey, you're worth something internally as well as externally. And keep streaking.
Do one push up, become a better you. It's the small and simple things that make you grow into what you're hoping. You're in a hurry, don't even worry. It's too simple not to do. It's the little things that make a better you. A better you.